Welcome to Secrets to Depos 201. I'm Brooke Wagner. We're going to be discussing Q&A. Transcripts are a lot like a sandwich. Your proceedings make up the good stuff in the middle. Your meat, your vegetables, your cheese, the condiments. Your beginning pages and the ending pages are the bread that go on either side. Within the proceedings, there are several different components. So you've got headings, colloquy, parentheticals, your witness sworn-in phrase, another heading, and then you get into Q&A, which is your question and answer format. More colloquy, some parentheticals, and on the transcript goes. Today we're going to talk about the Q&A, or the question and answer section, that go on between the questioning attorney and the witness. Q&A makes up the majority of a transcript. When the attorney who asks the first question begins speaking to the witness, usually it's to say either my name is such and such, or it's to ask the witness, will you please state your name? That's usually how that begins. And then the examination usually ends with that attorney saying, I passed the witness, or I have no further questions, or I'm done. The next attorney will then ask a question of the witness. That immediately begins their examination and their Q&A. Every examination has a heading. So in depositions, it's okay just to put examination to not include direct or cross. So you could literally that heading could just say examination and then by Mr. Peterson with this formatting. And then the next one could say examination by Mr. Rowell. And then at the bottom it could say examination by Mr. Peterson again, because they kept trading back and forth. But no one ever says, I would like to begin my examination. They just start talking, and that's how you know the examination begins. And when they quit talking, that's how you know the examination stops. It's really important to keep in mind that your Q period and your A period, that those are not created by capitalizing a Q, putting a period, doing a tab, and then writing the word sir. It needs to be a format that's attached to that, an actual function. So any clips, you're going to use F3 to create a Q, and F4 creates your A. And you want to have that formatting. That way it's got all the spacing that's correct, and it helps your editing time. But if for some reason you have to come back and change your margins for a whole job, then your Q&A will line up correctly. So you want those to be formatted, not just simply typed in. Q period is the speaker ID that means question. And while it doesn't matter whether or not the attorney speaking is actually asking a literal question, we indicate that that's the person who spoke by that speaker ID. So Q period, being a speaker ID, represents the attorney. A period represents the witness. And again, it doesn't matter if what the witness says is a question or an answer, we represent that with the A period. If you're new enough in school, then you haven't really practiced how to hit your Q&A on your machine, and it probably isn't defined yet for you. So the way that I stroke Q is with my left hand, STKPWHR. So those are almost all of the consonant letters. Those are all the consonant letters on your left hand. If it doesn't translate to the Q period, any clips you want to highlight that phrase, do Control G, in F3. That should label it now as a question. For the answer symbol, I write FR, PB, GT, LG, TS, which is, the consonants, most of the consonants on the right hand. In Eclipse, again, if it's not coming up for you, you're going to want to define it, so highlight it, do Control G and F4. So if you want to take a second, pause this, to write those instructions down, that might be helpful. Most of the CAT software, your Case Catalyst, Eclipse, come with artificial intelligence. And one of the nice things is that when you hit Q, if the answer was above it, already formatted because you hit the answer bank, then it's going to automatically put your ending punctuation. So when you hit Q, the line above it, they're going to add a period. If you hit A, the line above it's probably going to get a question mark because they're tagging it on to the item that was directly previous to what you're now hitting as a speaker ID. So you can write without having to worry about, did I end everything with the correct punctuation? Most things that come from the speaker ID for the Q end in a question, and most things that come from the speaker ID with an A end in a period. The one thing you might want to keep track of is if the attorney asks a polite request or says a statement, then you're actually going to have to hit your period, and then if the witness has a question, you're going to need to end that with a question mark. But other than that, 95% of your punctuation, just based on the fact that you hit your question bank or your answer bank, is going to automatically populate. A great way to practice Q&A is by watching television. Any show that you've got more than one speaker in a scene consistently is an excellent way to practice Q&A. So, in this example of this program, you've got a Viking, and you've got his friend, and you have a dragon. So, we're going to assume that both the boys are going to have speaking parts. So I might assign this one the Q symbol, and this one the A symbol. And if you're under 140 words a minute in school right now, then especially if you're still learning basic theory, don't try to write the television program. Don't try to get all the words that the individual speakers say. Right now you're just working on practicing not having hesitation when different speakers start to speak. So when this person starts to have dialogue, I'm going to hit the Q, the question bank, and then when this individual starts talking, I'm going to hit the answer bank. That way, and just go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, working on trying not to have hesitation. Once you're in your 140s or a little, maybe 160s, now you can start to add in, when you're watching television, trying to add what they're saying as part of your practice. But for in the beginning, it's enough to just toggle back and forth between the speaker IDs. After maybe a 15-minute session practicing this, and I do encourage you to have hooked up with your software so you can, after about 15 minutes, see how you are stroking each of the speaker IDs. And you might find that you're not completely hitting one of the letters, so you're creating a common misstroke. Go ahead and take the time now and define those, because chances are in real Q&A that's going to be a constant for you. You're going to leave off that letter, so go ahead and make that a define. I have about 20 defines for my Q, and probably about 20 for my A, because enough can go wrong that I need that to be redefined as the full stroke. Now that you know how to write a basic Q&A speaker ID, now let's build on that a little bit. You can define so that when the attorney says okay at the beginning of every question, you can add that to your Q symbol, as well as the word alright, and right, and well. These are at least the 5 common things that an attorney will say at the beginning of a question. And so you can really save yourself some time by putting it into one stroke. So the way that I do okay with the question is the question bank, and then on my right hand the K, so that comes out okay. And then I've given you the ability in Eclipse to go ahead and define that stroke. So you would highlight the untranslate, hopefully that's an untranslate for you, do Control G, F3, and then OK. And then you can come down and you can stroke out alright, which I do the question bank, and then RT in the same stroke. And you just define that with alright. Question bank and, so question bank AND, question bank right, I do question bank RT, and question well is question EL with the asterisk. So you can stroke those. If they don't conflict with anything, then go ahead and define them. If they do conflict with something, just consider how often you may or may not hear what they conflict with. You're going to hear these 5 phrases 50 times in every job. Is what it's conflicting with going to be heard nearly that much? That's just something to think about if you're going to change something. If this does conflict with a word that you currently have, then play with it and maybe come up with another stroke that you would easily hit, like question and. If you already have a conflict with the question bank A and D, then, but maybe you wouldn't with question bank and then D. Maybe that could be your question and. So be creative. This is yours, and you, whatever makes sense to you is what you should do. So as we just did with the Q, there's several common things that people say as answers. So answer okay, answer yes, yes sir, yes ma'am, no, no sir, no ma'am, correct, well. Again, those are probably 40% of the answers you hear in any given deposition or in court. So the way I get them into one stroke briefs is the answer bank, and then usually something on the left hand to create the full stroke. So to get answer okay, I do K, initial K, with the answer bank. Then you just redefine that with the word okay. You go through, so my yes is E with the answer bank, my yes sir is SE with the answer bank, yes ma'am is ME with the answer bank. The which is saying yes as an answer, I use answer bank with the U. The negative doesn't come up very often, but you could do H with the answer bank. Correct comes up quite often, and then well comes up often. So again, if you're in Eclipse, do Control G, F4 to get your answer symbol, and then write in these words. One thing that I didn't mention earlier, if you think you want to add ending punctuation, like your well would almost always have a comma after it, then when you add the comma into the definition, you may need to play with it to see if you need to add a space or if your software automatically creates that space. So you might want to write your brief and then write another word after it just to tell if it's taking in the correct spacing for your punctuation. And if you didn't do it right, go in and modify it or delete the entry and start over. And lastly, I hope you learned a lot from the Q&A section. And now that you've created some new briefs for yourself, hopefully if you didn't know about them before, you've added in some quick briefs so that you are reducing number of strokes between really common things that an attorney and a witness say. Go ahead and make yourself or ask a friend to make for you a little short, maybe 1-2 minute practice piece with these new phrases so you can hear them and you can practice them for a couple of weeks and really get those strokes memorized. It's going to save you time and tests, and happy practicing.